Hello, welcome to Fabulous Food. Today we're going to make an apple crumble pie. So before we start we need to set the oven and we're going to put it on 180 degrees. So we make the pastry first. We put the bowl onto the scales and set them to 0, and then we're going to weigh in 250 grams of plain flour. And to the plain flour we're going to add a pinch of salt, like that, and 125 grams of cold butter or margarine. I've cut mine up into cubes because it helps me to start rubbing it into the flour. And then we're going to take the bowl away from the scales and we're going to rub the butter and the flour together. So we use the tips of our fingers because they're cooler than the palm of our hand and we don't want to melt the butter. And we just gently break the butter down into the flour. So find all those cubes of butter and just begin to squash them and make sure you've got lots of flour in amongst it. Make sure you go right to the bottom of the bowl to get all the dry flour and keep going until you've got a mixture that looks like fine breadcrumbs. When you think you're nearly done, give the bowl a shake, and if there are any big lumps, just break them down and make sure that there's the breadcrumb lumps and not lumps of butter. If they're lumps of butter, they'll still be yellow. So there's my breadcrumbs, and now I'm going to add 3 to 4 tablespoons of cold water. 1, 2, 3, I think I'm going to go for 4 straight away. And then I'm going to bring that together using a knife. So I'm just going to stir it round the edge of the bowl, bringing all the dry ingredients into the water in the middle, and keep going, and it should begin to come together. If it doesn't, you might need to add a little bit more water. I'm going to have to put a little bit more water into mine. Different flours absorb water at different rates, so it's always a bit of trial and error. But you should be able to tell when it's okay because it will begin to come together and look like you're going to be able to get it into a ball. So I'm going to have a go with that now. We'll see if that's going to work. So one hand into the bowl and just begin to squeeze the ingredients together. You can see it's come into a ball very nicely, and then use the ball to pick up all the dry bits in the bottom of the bowl. Pop it onto the work surface, and then just bring it together with your hands, just a couple of kneads just to bring it together. Mine's quite crumbly. It's going to be a very short pastry. Okay, so before we can roll it out, we need a bit of flour on the work surface to stop it sticking. And I'm going to encourage mine into a circle shape because that's the shape that I want in the end. So it's best to start with that too. And then remember, 2 gentle rolls, and then wiggle the pastry, turn it 90 degrees, 2 gentle rolls again, and you just keep doing that and it will gradually come into the size and shape that you need it to be. If it's getting a bit sticky on the top, you can put a little bit of flour on the rolling pin and that will stop it sticking. So I'm just going to keep going now until it's big enough. This is the tin that I'm going to use. It has a loose bottom, so I can just check by putting the bottom onto my pastry. I can see that's going to be plenty big enough now. I'm just going to run a palette knife underneath my pastry and make sure it's not stuck at any point before I try and put it onto my tin. Now that's fine. Because I've got a loose bottom, I can slide that underneath the pastry. And then I'm just going to fold the edges over like that. Get hold of the bottom and drop it into my case like that. If you haven't got a loose bottom, you'll have to lift the whole of the pastry up and drop it in your case. But we can help you do that, so don't worry. And then just with the edges of my fingers there, I'm just going to gently press in all around and get the pastry to go into the corners of my tin, or the edges, and then you can see it's plenty big enough. It's hanging over the edge, so I'm going to get a sharp knife now and just trim it off. So I'm just going to follow around the edge of the tin as much as I can. I can't where the handles are, so I'll have to guess around there. So always cutting down, never towards your hand. Gather those bits up. I might make some jam tarts with those later on. So there's my pastry case. I'm going to put that in the fridge now to chill while I make the apple filling. For the filling you need 2 cooking apples, but I couldn't actually buy cooking apples, so I've bought these Granny Smiths, which will be fine because they're nice and tart, but they're smaller, so I'm going to use 4. So I'll show you how to prepare 1 apple and then you'll know how to do the rest. So first of all we need to peel it. So you can challenge yourself if you want, see if you can get it off in one go, like that. That's quite tricky. And then we've got to quarter the apple. So we're going to put our bridge hold across the top. We're going to rock the knife to come down through the middle, down towards the chopping board. Then we're going to put the flat sides of the apple to the board, bridge hold again, cut through the middle of both. Then we need to take the core out. So knife at 45 degrees, pincer grip at the top to cut through the core. There we are, you can see it's gone. We'll do that for all 4 pieces. If you notice any bruises on your apple, any bits of brown, then you'll need to cut those off at this point as well. And then we're going to cut them into slices. So pincer grip at the top, fingers away from the knife, just cut across like that to get some slices. When you get to the last bit, you'll need to use a bridge hold and cut between your fingers like that. So once again, pincer grip at the top, slice your apple, bridge hold for the last bit, and keep going till all of your apples are prepared. Once all your apples are chopped up, you need to put them into a bowl. And then we're going to add 50 grams of soft light brown sugar. So bowl on the scales, set it to 0, put 50 grams of sugar in. Add a bit of sweetness to the apples. And we're also going to put in half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. That'll smell lovely. And the final ingredient is 1 tablespoon of plain flour. And that will just thicken up the juices that come out of the apples and make a lovely jammy-like base in your crumble. So I'm going to mix these together now. So with a spoon, I'm just going to gently, because you don't want to bruise the apples, remember, if you drop an apple it bruises very easily, doesn't it? So just gently mix those dry ingredients into the apple until you can see that all of the apple has been coated. Make sure you go right to the bottom of the bowl. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. So I'm going to get my pastry case out of the fridge and tip these into it. So once your apples are in the case, you just need to spread them around gently so that they are evenly distributed. Can be a bit lumpy and some of them can stick up, so you just need to be patient because you don't want it to stick up out of the crumble. Once they cook down, they'll soften anyway and spread into all the little hollow gaps you've got. So that's my apples into my pastry case. I'm going to set that aside and make my crumble topping. To make the crumble topping, we're going to put our bowl back on our scales, set it to 0, same as normal. And then I'm going to weigh in 100 grams of plain flour, and 100 grams of cold butter or margarine cut again into small cubes to help it rub in. Take the bowl off the scales so it doesn't break them. And then it's the same process as for the pastry. We're going to rub the butter into the flour. So get your fingers covered in flour, start to break down the butter. Just the fingertips, Keep going until you've finished rubbing in and it looks like fine breadcrumbs again. So you should be very good at this by now. You've got a much higher proportion of butter to flour this time, so it's harder to get fine breadcrumbs. So I'm going to leave mine like that because the butter's melting in my hands. Pop it on the scales, set it to 0, and then we're going to add 50 grams of oats. So that's porridge oats, not the instant kind that you get in a packet to put in the microwave, but the ones that you'd actually make, say, flapjacks with, or proper porridge. 50 grams of oats, and then set the scales to 0 and add 25 grams of granulated sugar. Take it off the scales, give it one last mix. You can see you've got a lovely oaty, buttery mix there. And then we're going to put that onto the apples before we put our apple crumble pie into the oven. So just tip it over, try and spread it out a little bit as you tip. And I'm just going to use the knife, or you could use a spoon, just to tease the crumble all over the apple. There, so that's going to go into the oven for between 30 and 40 minutes until the crumble is crisp and golden. So I've taken my apple crumble pie out of the oven now, and it took 35 minutes to bake, and you can see that the pastry is nice and brown around the edges and the crumble is crisp and golden. So we look forward to seeing you in the classroom where you're going to make this product yourselves. Bye bye.